Welcome back to UnCeiling You. It's 2026, and I took a month off from the podcast in December of 2025. But guess what? We're back. And today's episode is one I want you to listen to a little differently. Because on the surface, this conversation sounds a lot like a story about business, about visibility, and even space, as in outer space. But underneath, it's about something much more important, something I think a lot of high-performing leaders are living without even realizing it. My guest, Jennifer, went through a season of life where becoming invisible wasn't insecurity. It was literally survival. She experienced homelessness as a teen, and she learned how to blend in because it kept her safe. Then years later, she realized something that stopped me in my tracks. That same pattern can keep running long after it's needed. And I'm sure there's a pattern that's running in your life long after it's needed. Not because you're weak, but because in some ways, it's hard to recognize. Your nervous system doesn't automatically update just because your life has changed or because something has suddenly become safe. So as you listen, I want you to pay special attention to 3 specific moments in this interview. First, listen for when Jennifer talks about invisibility as a skill she learned. Then the exact moment she realized she was still making herself smaller even when she didn't need to. Second, listen to her reset. She didn't employ mind shifts or affirmations. She had an aha moment which helped her shift to the next gear of her experience. And she embraced her past and her future all at the same time during this aha moment. And third, listen for how she describes burnout, because she makes a point I agree with deeply. High performers don't burn out because they're incapable. They burn out because they're misaligned. This episode is really about that inner shift that makes your outer leadership sustainable. So let's get into it. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here. You went from being homeless to now potentially living in space. It's not just a metaphor that you're going to the moon, and your story proves that it's possible to go from rock bottom to global influence. You've said that being able to look up at the moon and know where you're likely to reside someday is so deeply symbolic. And what does that moment represent for you? What inner shift had to happen for you to reach that kind of bold vision?
So March 2nd, a lunar lander landed on the Mare Crisium, which is one of the spots on the moon. There's 2, and one's the Mare Crisium, and it held a pyramid structure that had the national assets of Asgardia. It also had my bio, my photo, the ones of the other ministers in it, and information about me. It was just incredible. And Cheryl Gallagher, who is our Minister of Culture, she is the one who spearheaded this, and she's amazing. She lives outside of Austin. She's this incredible artist. She does regular art, paints and creates and things. And she also is a musician. So she's with this band. She puts out a lot of things. And I'm not saying it very well. She's just this really amazing woman, but she's very involved in space. And she goes all over the world talking about Asgardia, meeting other Asgardians and sharing culture and doing incredible endeavors. And it's really her one activity for years in meeting the people, spearheaded this. One person was able to get this initiative up for all the millions of Asgardians around the world. And we all met together. It was the middle of the night. So it's like midnight. We're on a Zoom. NASA was doing their Zoom. I was in my digital form in Second Life at the Asgardia Embassy in a digital virtual world. And so people from all over the world logged into this virtual world and were walking around and watching this. And it was just because of this one person, their own passion, that we should not have a militarized space, that it should be for all. And, we should be able to understand how we could be born in space. What does that need? Where do we go from here? Well, at the same time, how can we fix and have a good, clean, healthy earth and society here, right? And it was just inspiring, right? The whole idea that what started out as me thinking, oh, these are a bunch of LARPers, so these are sci-fi nerds. Oh, they seem a little fun. What's this weirdo stuff? And now, like, I'm heavily involved in it, and I'm a minister, and I'm thinking, this is the power of still believing that we can change the world, right? There is this undercurrent, especially now in society, that, well, stop dreaming. It's too corrupt. You'll never get there. Politics and government, they're too corrupt. They'll never let you. They'll never let you do it. So just stop the dreaming. You're stupid to do it. This very negative, oppressive feeling. So when I saw that, it was freeing. It was like I was punching through those negative clouds and energy going, no, we can still dream for the stars. We can still dream for our planet and the people around here. We can still want peace and push for that and to do those things. And each of us have our own idea of what it's supposed to be. And that's okay. We just have to figure out what our divine responsibility and purpose to our soul in this iteration right now is, and we can get there. So it meant a lot.
Wow. So what advice would you give to someone who feels invisible right now? Like that negative cloud is hitting on them and they're struggling to believe that they have a place in the world, let alone on the moon.
Well, you had brought up that there was a time in my life I was homeless, and it was during my teen years and through college. I was homeless that entire time. And you wouldn't realize that about me, especially if you met me now. I have a family that most people go, oh, you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth. And because I have this incredible large family, but addiction is a terrible thing. Money issues can happen to anyone. It is scary how quickly you can go from just having a home and having a job to having nothing. And I saw families dropping their kids off at the Covenant House shelter because they didn't want them to go to the adult shelters because of safety issues. Covenant House is for kids who are homeless, and who had no one. And that was where I went. And at that time, you could stay there for a couple weeks. Then they kind of kick you out in the streets, hoping that you would find a place. And if not, they would open it back up again. So it wasn't the greatest, because even if you were doing everything right, you still would get kicked out for a while because funding and other things like that. But going, if you're in that place and talking about feeling invisible, I call it one of my superpowers I learned being homeless, because as a young child, you don't want, and you're homeless. I would say I wasn't a young child, but I was still a teen, I was an idiot, but I feel like I was an idiot until I was 40. But still, not being seen was something that I wanted. I didn't want to be noticed because there are predators, lots of predators. And Tina Fey had a great book about it. And she said, it's not the beauty that draws a predator's eye, it's the damage. And she was absolutely right about that. So I just tried to become invisible in many ways. So I understand that, but then there comes a point where you have to break out of that invisibility or you'll never accomplish anything. So my adult life has been in consulting, where I had to go into businesses that were in crisis, which I did for 20 to 25 years. And I would go in, everybody's on fire, I'd put them all out, and then I'd have to figure out where the rot was. And so most people hate consultants. When a consultant comes in, oh, they're just here to fire us. That's usually the thought is, I'm here and I'm going to get everybody fired, right? Or I'm going to change a bunch of stuff that we like and not change what's really wrong, all those things. So I would just start working along with people until they just stopped noticing me. And then I could see which processes were or were not working. And so in many ways, that was a superpower for me, the ability to blend no matter what I was doing. But then it became not fun all the time. So I have a friend who's a boutique hotel consultant, and her job is basically to network. She was very good at what she did with sales and getting things done and networking and meeting people and being visible and being out there. That was her skill. And I noticed, we've been friends a long time, but there is a point that we would go to this one person's restaurant, very well known. And every time she walked in, he would remember her. And I would go with her all the time. Never seemed to remember me. And it started to bother me. And I realized that I had fears, limiting beliefs, and I was making myself smaller in situations where I didn't have to anymore. I didn't have to be afraid. There wasn't a predator that was going to go, let's try to get her or whatever. And so once I made that switch, all of a sudden I started getting remembered. And now I'm coming on to podcasts, I'm speaking more, and I'm putting myself out there because I feel like what I have is valuable and it helps people not just make a lot of money, it does, but it also helps them in their life get through those limiting beliefs. So if somebody is feeling like that, the first thing I ask them is straight from the book, Who Moved My Cheese, which is something I live by. It's like a pamphlet, but I swear it's the most powerful pamphlet you'll ever read. And it's just one question. What would you do if you were not afraid?
Mm.
And once you ask that, you can pick apart the realistic, the good, healthy fears, which we have some, and then the majority of it, which is just limiting, is not going to actually happen. And then you can do what you need to do to go to what your purpose is.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And you talked about the fact that you help women and people grow their business. And many women want to grow their business. And you and I talked about this, but they don't ask for what they need or, more importantly, what they're worth, which
Yes,
was
women
startling.
Yeah, women need to be like, one thing men do get right, God put some love on the men here, is they network and they do not shy away from asking for help. And they also don't shy away from saying, this isn't my job, and not that we appreciate that, right? There are some ways that this isn't my job works, and some ways it doesn't, right? Well, honey, go get my coffee, right? Well, I'm sorry. I'm the director of sales here. I'm not going to go get you your coffee. Not because I'm not a team player, but because you can go get your coffee,
You
right?
have two legs and the ability to pour the coffee.
Right?
I'm sorry. I remember this. My father-in-law lived with us for a short time. After my mother-in-law passed away, he moved in with us, and my husband can see it coming. And so my husband's like, you don't have to wait on dad, because that's what mom did. And one morning I came down and he was sitting at the table with an empty cup of coffee in front of him. And I too grabbed my coffee, and there was no coffee in the coffee maker. And so I looked at him and I said, hey, Dad, do you want some coffee? And he said, yeah. And I said, come on up. Let me show you how to make it. And he had to laugh. And he said, you're going to take some getting used to.
Well, yeah, we all get to learn. That's one thing. I work with a company now, Brand Lab, and grow or die is a core value, which I love. And that's really it. We all have to grow or die. Stagnation in life is the same as stagnation in business. If you get to that place, you're dying. So you need to keep on moving forward. And learning new skills is one of them, dad-in-law. But then now you can make your own coffee. You taught him to fish. I'm teaching you to fish. So you'll always have fish.
And so one of the things you also mentioned is that women were hesitant on naming their price. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. It's weird. It's like they won't get analytical about the price. And also for some reason, women, but it's not just women, it's all business owners, shy away from really looking at the numbers, right? Well, the bills are paid this month, or the bills are not paid this month, but there's many numbers you have to track in a business to know if you can really push the dial up and where you need to go. But one of them is just pricing, right? So if you're not shopping and seeing what your competitors are charging and what they're charging for, that's one thing. But I would say most people are not charging for what it is, right now that they're supposed to. So you just need to think to yourself, what is it actually worth? What's in it for the person getting it? What's their alternatives? What else are they going to do? And what are they going to be paying for that over time? So clinic owners, it's very, well, only insurance. Yes, but how much longer will they actually get to an outcome where they are healed, or are they kept in the drug surgical thing, which has a failure rate? I mean, there are some chiropractic standards that are required, like Medicare. This is all they'll pay for, 70% failure rate. But that's what people go through, and they know that that's what we reimburse for. And people will say, nope, if Medicare doesn't pay for it, I'm not going to do it. Yes, but you'll be paying that for years, and it's a 70% failure rate, and you never get healthy. Whereas you could pay $2,500 to $5,500 for the same type of treatment, depending on where you live, and you actually get healthy and have a completely different quality of life.
Right.
So Let's think about this a little bit. Right? And it's just, do you value it? And that too is you. So I see a lot of people who get into business because they have to make money, but they're not tied to how they make the money, right? They're not, their soul is not in that. That's not really what they were put on this planet to do.
Mm.
You have to really, if you're going to have a successful business, you need to be able to say, this is what I was meant to do. This is
Yeah.
my divine purpose and my divine responsibility. You know, our untapped potential is one of the greatest burdens we have to deal with as people. Are we working towards our potential or are we not? Unhappy people that, you know, have heart attacks and they flip out and they get burnout, they're typically people who don't work towards their purpose. They may make some progress, but if you ask them, you know, are you really where you're supposed to be today? Did you do anything towards that? Heck, did you do anything towards what you think your purpose is in the last week? They'd say, no, I go to work every day and I come home.
Right.
Whereas you'll have other people not making the same amount of money. Maybe this person's getting paid a fortune. And did you work? Yeah, I think I did. I've got to, you know, not every day. But I do believe that if God came down, he'd say, yep, just keep swimming. Just keep on doing it. And the difference in their physicality, how healthy they are, how mental they are, is just stunning, right? So you have to think that. And if you're like, well, that just doesn't, you know, we have people that can be quite negative, you know, and I think if you don't think this works, think about COVID and think about TikTok. There are people who lost their jobs and everything else, and they built an alternate economy on an app. I mean, millions. There's like 8 million small businesses happened overnight because those people said, I'm just going to try it. I want to make money, and this seems fun. Some of them did dancing. There was a lady who worked as a chemist, lost her job, and she was a big Harry Potter fan and really loves all that sort of scientific fantasies, sci-fi and fantasy stuff. And she said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm kind of crafty. So she makes little bottles and she has figured out different formulations. And some of the bottles, you shake them and they turn different colors. And she takes wax and she puts like little things. She curates, you know, the paper. She'll draw it out and she'll make these fake, you know, like magical potions that you just put up, but they're kind of cute. You can just change color. She made an entire business out of that. And people are paying her anywhere from $16 to sometimes $80 for a fancy bottle that has really cool different things in it. Some of it can change color. Some of it's really fascinating what those chemicals can do. But they're really beautiful. There's another woman who loves books and she was good at dioramas. She made an entire business where she makes these books that have dioramas inside of it. And she's created, you know, these fantastical scenes and you press a little button. She figured out how to put little fairy lights and different things in it. And those are bookends now. Made an entire business out of it. And it's just fascinating, like a little world on your bookshelf. So yeah, you can think about it and do it. And what's the worst thing that happen? No one likes it. But guess what? There was enough people who did. So it's never wrong to lean into what is your purpose and what makes you happy and what makes you smile and what makes you excited to get up every day. And some people, that's accounting. God bless y'all, right? I mean, God, you know, I don't particularly like accounting, but I sure will help an accountant scale their business. But, you know, that's what makes me happy. I'm good at that, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm doing what I'm happy with. And every day I'm like, I help someone with their little dream because that's my purpose, right? And so if you think about that, I talk about ethical entrepreneurship all the time. That's what I talk about. And people go, oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, I want to be an ethical entrepreneur. What do you mean ethics? And the heart of it is, are you doing what you're put on the planet to do? And do you honor that? And if you are, you're going to act more ethically. You're less likely to make decisions that are not good for your staff or going to harm them or be, one of those terrible bosses that we hear about all the time that are like, no, I'm sorry that your father died, but if you're not here by 2:00, you don't have a job. There are people who actually do things like that. Do you think they're an ethical entrepreneur? Are they living their dream? No.
Yeah. And that is so sad to see people have to work under someone like that. And so how do you help people, well, of course, that reach the the ethics and the ethical way of doing business, but more importantly, finding their purpose, finding their passion. How do you go about that?
Well, number one, I would say no one has to do anything they don't really want to do. That was a choice that you made. You make that choice, and yes, there are consequences for it. You might go broke for a while. You might have to lose your house or lose something, but I'm going to tell you, it's going to be at less of a cost than selling your soul. And I know because I've starved. So I know exactly how bad it is to starve. This is from someone who has, do have limiting belief money issues. And sometimes I'm like, no, I'm still going to do this decision because I've got to, right? Even though I saw people make decisions and end up in bad places. So, it's still worth it in the end. It's worth letting go of an employee who is a malignant person, who's miserable at their job, who you're just like, oh, I can't let them go, but they're really unhappy here and they never do anything I want and I've got to redo everything. But they show up every day on time. Sorry, that's somebody that needs to be let go. So how do you let them go? If you can afford to, you can give them, a couple of weeks severance or even more if they deserve it and they've been there for years and years and years, and help them ease them out, but get someone in who can do it, right?
Yeah.
If it's yourself and you just can't feel to do it, you're just going to have to take the risk and do it. I mean, there are women in abusive relationships who have to leave. And there are organizations that'll help you. Are you going to lose everything? Yeah, and it's terrible. It's terrible that you can't sleep in that nice bed that you finally had, but nobody's going to be hitting you. You won't be worried about your kids, and you'll have to start from scratch, but at least it's your place. I mean, there's tons of evidence as women saying, it's not much, but this is mine. And I have 5 locks on that door, but I felt safe last night.
Right.
I mean, nothing can change that. So no matter how bad it is, somebody's probably got it worse, but you can do it. You can do it. And you should if it's gonna change things. Just dig down there and go, this is not what God wanted for me. And if you don't believe in God, this is not what my soul wants. This is my one shot. I've got to just change it, right? To something different. And you have to. And I know it's scary because there are bad statistics. People leave and that's when the real violence occurs, But there are things you can put in place to mitigate that risk. And there are organizations that you can get in touch with to help you mitigate that risk. But it's always better. I would say just, you're still going to have to try to do that. And my heart goes out to you if you're in a situation like that right now. I'm not saying it's easy.
Right.
It is hard, but life is hard. It's hard for all of us. And we're just on this rock hurtling through space, trying to not scream off into the void. But there's still ways we can get joy and go, I'm just going to do it. Open up that little hot dog stand somewhere. You can do it. You can do it.
So, and it's interesting that you list all the different ways that people had started businesses on TikTok. In fact, we had on one of the episodes, one of my friends, Anna, who started a business making candles, and it took off. One TikTok video went viral that really talked about she had a little diffuser that can go into cars, and people loved it. And that took off. That gave her the courage to know that she could do it. How has your experience with Asgardia and its peaceful vision of space exploration influenced how you think about leadership here on Earth?
Well, it really exposed me to people from other cultures. So Asgardian is worldwide. So I originally, like I said, it was a lark. I just was following it on social media. I joined their Discord and I was like, yeah, this is cool. Do we play Dungeons and Dragons? What are we going to do? What is this? And then as I got into it, I realized that there's a whole government behind it and they had an opening for parliament. It happens, parliamentary things. I applied. I made a video of what I thought I could bring to the table. And I thought I'm going to make this real professional, like they hadn't seen anyone professional before, which was, I was still so green. But I did it, and over 1 million people voted me in. They liked it. And then I went to my first parliamentary meeting, and they're like, here's the head of parliament, speaker of parliament was Lembik Opik. And I was like, wait a minute, didn't he date Spice Girl? And isn't he a member of British Parliament? Yeah. Oh, parents were both world-class mathematicians known all over the world. And then I started meeting people in these parliamentary meetings that had Nobel Peace Prizes and were absolutely amazing. What they didn't have a lot of were entrepreneurs.
Huh.
And so that's where I came in. And I was able to bring that, and I was appreciated for it. And so it was odd because they're like, oh, yes, I was talking to Clinton and I was doing this. And you're hearing all this stuff. And you're like, oh, here's me. I'm a business person with small businesses. But it was interesting because a lot of them are researchers and astronauts and cosmonauts and scientists and mathematicians and like Cheryl, incredible artists and people in the diplomatic space and space. And then I was voted in to become the Minister of Equity and Resources, so one of 12 cabinet members. But going through this process, because now it's been, 7, almost 8 years, I was exposed to people who grew up under socialism. I'm exposed to people who are currently with socialist governments or even communist governments, people who have very different ways of thinking about how a government should work. It really opened my mind to what is neutral. What is a neutral frame of thought? And how can I be more neutral to where I still have my own bias. I have my own bias. I'm American, but really I'm a Texan. If people ask me where I'm a Texan, and then I'm an American, and then that is bias right there, just inherent in just saying that. And so it helped expose me to there's whole other ways to live. There's whole other ways to govern and to think. There's entire other value sets. Doesn't mean that I don't judge some. I do. I do have judgments. I'm like, no, that is not for me, or I don't think that's good for humans, or whatever. But I will still listen to it and go, okay, I can see how that came about, and I could see how you would like it if this, this, and this. That sort of discourse that I enjoy right now as an Asgardian and meeting other Asgardians, I am very sad seems to be disappearing in the global conversations, especially if you're on social media or you consume mass media, mainstream media. It is very divisive. Like, where is all the people coming together and saying, I don't agree with John or Trump or Biden or this, but I do see how this was good. I probably would do this. Why can't we have these civil sorts of discourses and conversations? And so it has really given me an appreciation of that, and also a passion for podcasting, which still very much has that, and wanting to be on these platforms to where I can talk about my little experience, but also too, I can be exposed to other things so that I can consistently, I want to grow as a human being. Maybe what I really hold fast to right now is not what I'll hold fast to later. So I want to listen to other points of view. I want to expand my mind, and I want to know truth. And I understand that truth is subjective to this person, but what is the greatest good? We do have things that can be the greatest good we can still think about. So I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, that's what it's done to change me. But it also, in a business way, like how I interact with different businesses. I mean, as a consultant, you don't always get along with everyone, but my job isn't to be their best friend. My job is to help them 2 to 10x their business. So I have to be open and understand which questions to ask and probe, so I can see where the limit is, the limiting belief that is keeping them from going to one thing to another.
Gotcha.
So it helps me.
So 2 follow-up questions from that answer. The first is, you're talking to Nobel laureates, these very famous people. What stopped you from shrinking in that situation?
That was also too from my experience of being homeless, and then my family, is that I met so many different types of people. And if I shrink, then maybe it wouldn't give somebody else an opportunity. The fact is, we are all equal. I've met really incredible, famous people that I thought in the back of my mind, you're a garbage human being. That's terrible. I'm not going to tell you who it was. And then I've met other people that I have found to be absolutely brilliant, and hardly anybody knew about them. Some of them have been on my show, and they've said such nuggets of universal wisdom. I've thought, we have to get this out to everyone, right? We are all valuable. I am valuable. There is a reason those people voted for me. There's a reason when I worked hard and they said, hey, this is really valuable for us. And I was like, yeah, that's why I'm here. God put me here because I have a bit of experience that you guys didn't have. And it doesn't mean that I'm not, respectful and I won't defer to someone who has more experience in an area, but I'm not going to shrink because I'm here for a reason. You're here, whoever you are, you're there in that room or that table. You made it there for some reason. So you owe it to yourself. I talk about divine purpose, divine responsibility. You owe it to yourself to show up for yourself. And so that's why I don't shrink.
I love that. And thank you. The other question I had is you were saying that you got a chance to listen to different points of view. You made yourself neutral and you understood what your biases were. You made yourself neutral to listen to what other people had to say about governance. What is one surprising thing you learned about governance that you feel you can use in today's political environment?
I wish people would realize how long it takes for real good change to occur and how much thought goes behind making laws and making acts, just an act to get an act agreed upon and signed, and how much it takes to do that. We only see, oh, they voted on this and this happened, but we don't see the years of work that it took to get it to that, right? So I wish people would understand it more so they could be involved more in the earlier processes. We do have a problem with lobbying if you're talking about America with lobbying. I believe everyone should be able to lobby, but it should be equalized, meaning I think it's absolutely atrocious that Facebook and Google and them, have billion-dollar basically lobbying budgets. They have 2 lobbyists for like every member of the Congress and Senate. How can those people compete against someone with a little small business who's trying to lobby, even if it's for good, because they're lobbying so hard for these very specific billionaire, trillionaire interests, right?
Right.
So I think if more people were savvy to the process and how long it takes and savvy to that, they would push a lot harder to put things in place for lobbying and for that early process so that when we finally got bills, they weren't so stuffed with pork. They weren't stuffed with things that were absolutely ridiculous, had nothing to do with the main version of the bill. So I wish people understood more about that because I think that we could enact the change we really, really want a lot better.
Can you let people know how to find your podcast or how to find you to help, because you can help them ethically up their business by also being true to their purpose. So how would they best find you?
Just go to superclinicproject.com. So I do a podcast now. It's mostly for service-based business owners, but most of it is clinic-based business owners. That's why it's Super Clinic. So superclinicproject.com. You'll see my picture, Jennifer Gligoric. When you click on it, then not only can you get into my free school, there's another coach there. I mean, there's a whole team. But when you click on my picture, you can get directly to me and you can even have a free session with me. So if you have a challenge you need to work with, and you're just like, how do I get over this? Or I'm thinking about firing somebody, whatever it is. I don't care. I'll help you with anything. You can go there. So you get a bunch of freebies and you can also get a session.
Here's our insider questions. These are just quick things. What is a productivity myth that you see high achieving women fall for again and again? And what can you replace it with?
I would say for high achieving in business, the first thing you want to do if you're a business owner is look at your fulfillment and your admin duties. The first thing I would try to get out is the actual fulfillment. And then I would get out of admin. Usually business owners try to get it out of the admin duties first while being stuck in fulfillment. And your highest best use of your time and talent, if you're a CEO or you're a business owner, is going to be in building the business, networking, brainstorming, and also to leading your staff to your vision and helping them along the way. So your first person that you need to think about is the person that helps you get out of fulfillment. So you want to do the marketing and the promotion. Even if you don't think you're great at it, you will be great at it because that's how you convey your value and what you're put on this planet to do.
Great. Now you've built your career on reviving struggling businesses. How do you help someone tell the difference between a business that needs pivoting versus one that needs to close?
that is not an easy question, right? So the numbers, number one, the numbers are important with it, but then there's the story behind the numbers and then how that person actually feels. There is burnout and then there's burnout, right? So a lot of it is when you wake up in the day, what are you excited to do this day? Where did you spend your hours of time? Sometimes they're so burnt out because they didn't get themselves out of fulfillment in that. So they're not really working on what they're doing. Sometimes it's because this is a failure business model for what it's doing, but you still might be able to pivot to something completely different, right? But if you're just completely burnt and you're like, I just really want to retire and I have nothing I want to do anymore, then we've got to figure out, well, that's not really an option. So how are we going to pivot out? It's the exit strategy. And then we work on what's a true exit strategy. And I've done that in businesses where I've been like, you're right, it's time to go. So how are we going to get the systems put in to where this thing starts making some money to where you can get out of it? And even in that process, they get to where they've built the right systems and it gets a little bit better. And then they change their minds sometimes. Not a lot. Usually once they get to the true burnout, they're ready to go. They're just happy that they were able to get something out of this business asset rather than to just lose their shirt, right? They actually had, they were in a position of strength when they talked to either investors or buyers for it. But sometimes it revitalizes them.
I like that. So can you walk us through your own mental framework when you price a high impact offer? What internal resistance still comes up for you?
Oh, okay. So number one, are they going to be able to pay for it? I'm an empathetic person by nature. I understand that, my own house has doubled in price for no reason whatsoever. And so I just had to battle my own home taxes. So I'm like a person out in this world who sees how much things cost and the fact that in a lot of things, salaries have not risen with that, right? So there's that person that I battle inside of my own head. And then the reality of, but this is what the market is charging. And also too, I say, what would be a price that they would value it and then commit to it? Because you can give away things for free or for a very low cost. If they're so low or they're such a great deal, even if that person said, oh, I don't think I could pay for that. Boy, that $2,000 is going to be so much. What are we going to do? And blah, blah, blah. And that you're $2,000 less than the guy up the street, but you're like, okay, we'll just do it. We'll do it this time for you. Guarantee that person's not going to show up. They're not going to appreciate it. They're not going to, even though they practically cried, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because if you weren't there to do it, they would have paid it for that. And they would have valued it. They would have showed up. They would have done all the treatments that they needed to do. And in the end, they would have been in the health or gotten the result that they really wanted. Right. So I would just price it the way it is, that's valuable and that they will actually value it and use it the way you have. So it doesn't really even matter if it's mostly I only talk to service-based people, but if it's a service and you're giving that service, then how can you continue to give a service if you can't pay your people properly? And you can't reinvest back into the business to add value, which for service-based people is learning better AI to help you get better outputs.
Right.
I mean, AI is a thing I have an AI I invest in that's really helped me a lot. I know everybody else is doing the same thing. Lawyers, doctors, everybody has something that's being worked on to help them. So you have to be able to reinvest. If you're already cutting it at wholesale every single time, you're not helping anyone. You're not really being the person you need to be out in the marketplace.
Yeah. So I would say to my ripple makers, even if you're not a business owner, you need to think about this because you're adding value to the business owner. And these are the things that they're thinking of. So these are very powerful concepts. I really think you are an amazing person. You bring such divergent information to us from the experience of the Asgardia, from your experience of going from homeless to doing the things that you're doing today. I just think you're so amazing. And I thank you for being on the UnCeiling You podcast.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Before you go, here's what I hope you take from this conversation with Jennifer. The The most powerful part of this episode wasn't the moon story, although that was pretty incredible. It was an internal one. Jennifer describes invisibility as something she learned when it was necessary, when safety required it. But then she renamed that part most people miss, because sometimes when the danger ends, your system will keep living like it hasn't. And for you, it doesn't have to be invisibility. It could be something else. That's why this isn't just about mindset or having the right mindset. And it's not about telling yourself to be confident. It's recognizing when fear is outdated, a lagging indicator from an old chapter that your body is still treating like it's current. And here's the leadership truth underneath that. When high performers start burning out, it's not because they can't handle the pressure. It's because they've been carrying pressure in their nervous system for too long, pressure that they don't need to carry. And so it's time to identify that, rise up, and override it by knowing what that is. So here's where Reset Your Pace comes in. It's a program that I was building in December when I took some time off. And Reset isn't self-care. Reset isn't stopping. Reset is a leadership upgrade that gives you tools that you can use in microseconds to lower that internal pressure, to identify that shift you need to make so that you can make clear decisions that take up the space you've earned without your system bracing for impact wherever you go. So here's a simple reflection question to close with you. And it's inspired by Jennifer. Where are you still using a survival strategy that used to protect you, but now is quietly limiting you? If that question hits you, you'll love my free guide, Reset and Recharge. It's built for real moments before hard conversations, after tense meetings, so you can reset your internal pace and lead from steadiness instead of strain. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time on UnCeiling You.